Okay, hi all. Today we're going to be processing our one zooplankton sample, and so I wanted to go over the major steps in processing. So our end goal here is to determine the density of zooplankton in a sample. The total density is a must-do, but you can look at the density of just selected individual taxa. So the first thing that we do is that, as you remember, we did sump pump filtering in situ at the water body. In our case, we were out on the Pond River, right down from the Potomac Science Center. So we've got a volume of water that was filtered in situ. That's going to be a big V. And then we've got a volume of water in the sample itself. And the first step is to measure the volume of ethanol and water in the entire sample. So that's going to be our volume 1. We use a graduated cylinder to do that. And then we look in the graduated cylinder and we assess whether there's a lot of organisms in there. So you can see little floating bits of pink in the sample and make a decision based on experience and just looking at that graduated cylinder on whether we want to take a subsample or whether we want to filter the entire sample. So we don't want to be breathing ethanol, and so we need to filter and rinse the organisms. And so what we do is we normally take a subsample. So say we have an entire liter in the bottle, and I look at it and I say, okay, it looks like I can take 200 milliliters and get a good number of organisms. And so my subsample, or V2, would then be 200 milliliters. I would filter it through, this is a little 20 micron filter and sort of a micro version of what we did in situ with a larger PVC and the 44 micron filter. So we're going to rinse and filter my subsample. I've told you it's 200 milliliters just as an example. And then we're probably going to concentrate that sample. So what I would do normally with a 200 milliliter subsample is I would concentrate it to 50 milliliters. And so to do that, all my critters are going to be on this filter. And so just like when we were out at the site and we backwash the filter into the 1 liter bottle, in this case we're doing a micro version of that, and we're going to backwash into a graduated cylinder. So I'll turn my little filter upside down and I'll use a squirt bottle with tap water in it, and I will backwash into a graduated cylinder to 50 milliliters or close to it. So always measure the exact number of milliliters. It doesn't have to be exactly 50, it can be 48 or whatever. So V3 then would be that backwash, normally concentrated sample. So then we do slide prep. If I have 3 students, or if there are 4 students in the group that's sampling, and everybody, by the way, gets to do this, not just the freshwater tidal or lake people. So everybody gets to try their hand at doing zooplankton processing. So next we'll move into putting our sample onto a slide. So this concentrated sample, put into a small beaker, then we use a disposable pipette to prepare a slide. And so these slides, and I apologize, can't really see the depth in the video, but this is called a Cedric rafter slide. This is sort of an old style version of it. It's got a brass plate on it, and you drip a sample into this. It has depth to it, and when this is filled, it'll be 1 milliliter, and you have a cover slip over this. We'll show you how to do this, and the cover slip will cover the organisms, and so there's actual depth. So each slide that you look at is 1 milliliter, and so if you have 4 students processing or looking at slides, your V4 then is going to be 4 milliliters. Okay, so when you are looking at the slides, your main goal is to ID and count, and you're going to go through some procedures on a light microscope where you get down to good visibility at 100 times magnification, and then we use ID guides, paper ID guides, our online guides to ID what's on the slide, and then we do a racetrack kind of counting and IDing activity to determine the total different types of organisms and the numbers on the slide. So once you're done with that, and you don't have to do this in the lab when you're doing it, although I highly recommend if you're doing this processing in the lab, not too long after, figuring out the density sort of as you go. So next you prepare a spreadsheet where you ensure that the spreadsheet is prepped so that you can easily do this calculation. And so again, density is number of organisms times two ratios, which the first one is volume 1 over volume 2, so that's the entire sample over the subsample. And then the second ratio is volume 3 over volume 4, so this is the concentrated volume over the number of slides. And then you divide that by the total volume extracted in situ, and you come up with a density and number of organisms per liter.